Well, welcome to this week's edition of Borders Rugby in Focus. The sun is shining, probably for the last time this season, but my guests today are Alistair Forsyth from Earlston Rugby Club, currently fixture secretary, but it's obviously held many positions over the years. We've also got the vice captain, who is Alastair Cessford, and of course, as usual, Dale Clancy is with me as well. And Dale, we always start with you, looking back at the weekend, and well, there was no Super 6 this weekend, but plenty of rugby going on, including the Premiership. Sadly, not the game that we were hoping was going to go on, with Selkirk playing at Jed Forest. That was wiped out because of a COVID case in the Jed camp. But we did have Hawick against Curry, and they were coming out of a COVID case. They had a couple of days to prepare, and my goodness, they did well. 25-20 win.
Yeah, definitely. I think we were always really looking forward to that border derby between Jed and Selkirk to get us off to what was going to be a good start for club rugby to be back on the calendar. But it's going to be, we said it last week, it's going to be a recurring case. Little did we know it was actually going to happen to Jed and Selkirk, but it's going to be a recurring case this season. You just look along the league tables and there's a lot of teams that have still got 0 games played after the first weekend, and that's just going to be the nature of what we've got to deal with for the next wee while. We don't know how long it's going to last, but I think Hawick, that's a terrific win. Obviously, we were speaking about how Curry's pre-season had went, obviously looking to really build, but Hawick got off to a good start, winning the Bill McLaren Shield as well. Seen the pictures of Matty Carrier with the Bill McLaren Shield, so I'm really chuffed that he's been able to do that in his first game as captain. So it's a really big positive start for Hawick in what's been a bit of a kind of turbulent time, not only COVID but the change of head coach, in pre-season just before things got underway. So it's a good way to start for Hawick.
We heard from Matty Douglas after the match as well, and he said he was very emotional during that, and I can understand that. Yeah,
totally. I think it's a great thing to see. There's not many clubs in the Borders that have a young local guy who was a promising rugby player. He was a really good rugby player that's had to kind of maybe change his path slightly. So to go into coaching, I think that's a really positive move. Hawick have given him a chance as well. The last really young coach I can remember was Finlay Gillis from he was at Glasgow Hawks. So I hope Mike Douglas does really well. He could build a really good successful career from it. From what I've heard, obviously know Matty Carrier very well. From what I've heard, he's a good coach. He's pretty screwed on. He's tactically quite astute as well. So hopefully they can keep going, and he's only going to learn as well. A good win, a good hard-fought win to open the league, but then after that, there's going to be ups, there's going to be downs, but hopefully that'll put him in good stead for the future, and Hawick as well.
Well, we didn't have that particular match, Jed against Selkirk, to have for our first commentary match, but we did nip down the road to the Green Yards, and I'm glad we did, because it was a great match. It was between Melrose and Heriots. Heriots running off to a 15-7 lead and looking pretty comfortable, and then it was like a switch was turned on, and back came Melrose, and they won in the end pretty comfortably, 26 points to 15.
Yeah, I think it was, from the coverage, obviously I feel like a bit of a fake, because I've not really seen any rugby in the opening weekend because of other duties, but it was the coverage that you've provided, Stuart, has been really good to watch back. The game I've watched with Stuart McFarlane covering it, and it just was a nice fast flowing open game of rugby on a nice dry pitch. Both teams wanting to play attacking rugby as well, a few talking points in there as well, but that's what club rugby is, and that's what you provide. It's something that you can digest after, take on board all the local talent that's there, and I'm really chuffed for Melrose. I think they're almost affiliated to the Southern Knights, and it's always going to be a long time for them to kind of break that away, but they certainly seem like they want to go their own direction, and it's good to see them get off with a win to start as well.
And they've got 4 scrum halves now, haven't they? They've got Bruce Colvin, they've got Struan Hutchison, they've got Ethan McVicker, and now of course they have young Douglas Crawford, who came on and just blitzed it.
Yeah, I've seen a bit of Douglas when the league's restructured and Super 6 came in. He was playing a bit for the Melrose team, and he always looked like a bit of a live wire. Ethan McVicker as well, really good. We know what Bruce Colvin can do. He's maybe for what he's he's now being a bit older, lacks in that yard of pace. He's still really quick, he's really strong, he's really experienced, and he's a leader as well. So he's got that. And Struan Hutchison's quite an adaptable rugby player. He's not, I wouldn't just chuck him in at scrum half. He can play 10 as well. If he wanted a ball player at 12, I dare say he could move him out one as well. So, Melrose have always been inundated with talent, and they're certainly, got a few players that they can call upon in the season, and they're probably going to need it with COVID issues and perhaps injuries, but certainly 4 talented players vying for the one jersey. So far we've had a Premiership win, we've had a National 1 win with Melrose, we've also got another 2 National 1 wins, Gala at home to Stirling.
A 34-7 win for them, but also a great result for Kelso at Cartha Queen's Park. Winning at Cartha Queen's Park is a very difficult thing to do, and a great start for them.
It's a good win for Gala. We did say that a win against Peebles in the Border League would build a bit of confidence, and it certainly has. Good dry pitch again, chuck the ball about, get some tries, and quite a comfortable win in the end. And you know, the Kelso one, it's a funny thing because we go on about historical results that happened years ago. The team's completely different, but sometimes these things do hang over you slightly and do put a bit of pressure on the team, but they're completely different. Got a lot of young guys coming through. They've had a successful youth system over the last few years, certainly breeding a lot of players through into the senior team. Bruce McNeil's experience, Andy Tate, these sort of players that we talk about time and time again. They're certainly building like a nice nucleus in that club, the experienced heads and the young guys to come through. So certainly a good win. Cartha's a very difficult place to go. They've kind of yo-yoed over the last few years, but to go away from home in your opening game in a league season and get a win is really impressive, and something not a lot of the other teams, you know, in the leagues have been able to do. And
as far as Gala's concerned, Tim McCavanagh and Murray Wilson look a dynamic duo in the centre.
Yes, now I'm going to have to do my research, but Tim McCavanagh, I believe, came from Dundee, and I think I played him a few years ago when I was just towards the end of me playing, and a really stocky, direct runner, really strong. And I was speaking about this with, I think it was maybe Matty, or Greg Rayburn, and we were speaking about Tim McCavanagh, and he is a direct, dynamic player, really, really good. I thought he was really impressive when I played him, so I'm really looking forward to seeing that centre partnership again. I've not seen a lot of Gala yet, but I'm very much looking forward to seeing a kind of a revitalised Gala with a bit of a kind of a Gala town stamp on it.
And good for them as well, because they've got 2 wins under the belt now because of obviously the match against Peebles, the Border League game the week before, which certainly stood them in good stead for the opening day of the league season. On to National 2, and talking of Peebles, they very nearly pinched a win at Kirkcaldy, and again another hard place to get a result.
Yeah, I'm going to have to rely on my sources again, but Greg Rayburn, I've been speaking to him about the game, and he's obviously out with an ankle injury, but they've obviously managed to put Donald Anderson in at 10 and reshuffle the pack. Really bad start to the game, got off to a really sloppy start and fell quite far behind in the first half, came back into it, and they're really unfortunate to lose to a last minute score and a conversion. And I think that's a sickener. To go up to Beveridge Park and to win would have been really good. It's a place that a lot of teams over the years have found very, very tough. Again, Kirkcaldy have risen up to the top of club rugby and fallen just slightly as well, so they're certainly a formidable outfit when they get going. But the Peebles will be looking, Stumel at home this weekend, they'll be looking to try and they'll be trying to make amends for that, because that was the 2 games they targeted. However, they've had a few injuries as well now, so I think they're a bit short in the front row. But again, there are a lot of young local guys. A lot of teams are going to have to rejig and revise their squads as the season goes on, but definitely I think Peebles look to that as an opportunity missed after such a slow start. Well,
I was talking to Colin Young, the head coach of Berwick, who are in National 3 this year, and he was absolutely gutted that their game couldn't go ahead because, again, a little breakout in the Berwick camp, so hopefully they will be ready to go this weekend, and we'll talk more about that later. But let's move into the East League. East League 1, Duns didn't have a game, but 2 wins in East League 2 for Hawick Linden over Leith, and a late winning try for them, and Langham getting a very good win at Inverleith, 28 points to 5.
Yeah, again, getting a win in your opening game in the campaign is really important, and for both of those teams to get that win, certainly for Langham, because it's certainly going to be a big year for them in terms of their landmark celebrations, and wins build confidence, as we've said before, and it's early days in the league. You can never tell what form's going to be like over the first few stages, but it's going to be interesting to see where those teams do kind of end up. Maybe 4 or 5 games in, you may be able to get more of a feel when they've played maybe a mixture of the teams, but certainly good to get off to a winning start. And certainly from the opening weekend, it looks like Borders Rugby's, really came out quite successful in terms of the win ratio, so good for them to get the win at the start.
East League 3, mixed fortunes. Gallo IM 40-0 at home to Liberton, a good result for them. We'll talk more about Earlston in a second, but a great start for Gallo IM, obviously.
Yeah, I've seen their result come through on social media, and a lot of photos and images from their games, and it was good to see a good big squad playing for them as well. I think it's a difficult thing as you go, and no disrespect or to be detrimental to the teams lower down, as you go lower down it's difficult to retain the players and keep them in a squad and keep a consistent team, so to keep a big squad there and get a win is really good for Gallo IM, and it's going to be interesting to see how that league progresses. But I'm not going to speak about Earlston at all, because I might get clobbered from either side. And certainly I was nowhere near the game and never seen it, so it's obviously a difficult one to get off, but yeah, I'm sure Earlston will be looking to try and make amends, and this is when I'll let these guys come in.
We'll do that very shortly, but just finally, the semi-junior league, of course, we saw wins for Hawick Youth, Peebles Colts and Kelso Quins, who made it 2 out of 2 for their campaigns. Selkirk Youth won 32-31 at home to Alnwick. They seem to be scoring tries, but they're letting a lot of tries in at the back as well. And the other 2 matches involving Borders teams were postponed. But, good to see the Borders teams all winning their cross-border games. Yeah,
definitely. We spoke about that last week and how it's a kind of an added battle in the semi-junior league, and it's really good to have that competition and that development as well. I think that's what we forget about. It's not just the same players playing the same teams week in, week out. They've actually got that little bit and it's ever so slight, but there's obviously a different culture just across the border as well, in the way that they develop their players and the way that their union want them to progress. So it's obviously slightly different in that aspect as well, but good for all the border teams to get off to a good start cross border. And as you said, I think I've heard a lot about Selkirk and Peebles due to my connections and where I live. Peebles, again, a very strong win for them, backing up a good win against Selkirk. But Selkirk, they shipped 50 points in their opening game, 30 points in their next game, plus or give or take a point or two. So they can certainly attack. They've scored 30 points plus in each game, so it's going to be interesting. I feel they're one of those teams that, as rugby players, they'll develop, they'll work together, they'll sort out their defence, and then they could be a team that could really push on as the games and they get a little bit more comfortable. And then Hawick Rugby as well, obviously up the top of the league just now after 2 wins from 2, and certainly looking good in the semi-junior.
Well, as they say, it's a marathon, not a sprint, and plenty can happen throughout the season. Well, let's bring in our very patient 2 guests now. Alistair Forsyth, currently fixture secretary at Earlston, but has held many positions, as I said, with the club for many years, and the vice captain, who is Alastair Cessford. And it's interesting, Alistair, that your brother is captain. So we have 2 brothers, 1 captain and 1 vice captain. That's a pretty unique achievement, I would have thought.
During pre-season he was quite involved, significantly more than he has been in the last few seasons, and Roy, the coach, just decided that the amount of effort he was putting in was really actually leading the training session, so they decided to reward him with the captaincy.
Well, he's of course down in London, so tell us about the match that happened down here. He was telling me that up to the first 20, 30 minutes or so, things were going pretty good. It was just, it got away from you in the second half.
Yeah, so they scored quite early on, but apart from that early score, I think we were fairly okay. But especially in the second half, the fitness got the better of us and they started running through. But it's not all bad, that result, because Dalkeith, they're a good team. Like, I'm pretty sure they basically missed out on promotion in the last two seasons due to a restructure and COVID. So I fully expect them to be challenging, if not walking away with the league. So hopefully that'll be the hardest game of the season. It's given us a lot of areas to work on, and that's what we've been doing at training. And we've got the benefit of having this weekend off with YM the following weekend, so there's a lot of effort being put into fixing where we went wrong and improving what we've done well.
And you'll certainly get your game up to speed for Gala YM.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's like we didn't make it easier for ourselves on Saturday. Like, we had a few call-offs prior to the game with we had a few people walking onto the pitch, not actually coming here expecting to play, but putting in their shift, so good on them. But hopefully when the YM come here, we'll turn up with a full squad, fully drilled, and ready to actually play a game of rugby.
Well, you mentioned fully drilled, and right on cue there, we've got some drilling on a roof behind us at the moment. I'm sure he'll be stopping that very shortly. But in the meantime, how are player numbers here at Earlston?
The league we're in, we've somewhat struggled with. It's like during pre-season and the training sessions for the season, we've maybe getting 12, 13, 15 boys. That's not really enough. Like, we need more to actually build a team and actually work on things, because there's no point 8 boys turning up and you can't really work on much apart from their skills. I mean, ultimately, it's a game of 15 players, and there's no point having 8 quality players if the other 8 aren't putting in the shift. But hopefully with the season up and running, with games actually on the horizon, people will start crawling out the woodwork and actually turning up. But we're hopeful that those numbers will pick up.
So it's not a big concern at the moment, but it's something that you'll be keeping an eye on, obviously.
Yeah. It's every now and then, there is a short-handed training session, but it's not a point where we're too concerned at it just now. The league we're playing in, we're not expecting 30, 50 boys doing it training. It would be a luxury, but we can't really expect that. But the boys that we've got down training, they're putting in the effort, and they're certainly, hopefully we can be rewarded for it.
Well, let's bring in the other Alistair now. This is Alistair Forsyth, who I've known for many, many years, of course, being connected with Earlston. And, your own kind of thoughts, Alistair, on the situation with player numbers at the moment.
I think throughout the country, every club's struggling, but probably touching something there, that the actual aim is to get 15 guys out in the park and enjoy yourselves. And I think that's one of our principles here at Earlston, is to do that. And if you get 20, it's a success in building that. But it's all about providing that avenue for guys to play rugby.
Where do you get your players from? Cause is there a link with Earlston High School? I know obviously Melrose up the road there are have a very good relationship with Earlston High School. I mean, do you have some of the boys coming from there to you?
There's a core of Earlston lads, there's friends of Earlston lads, but we're also actually trying to work links with Melrose to pick up Earlston boys who go to Melrose and then come back and develop their careers here that might not make the first or the second straight away.
And it's really important, isn't it, for clubs to kind of work together here? Otherwise, we're going to see more clubs going. Definitely.
That's what it's good to be cooperation. There's no point in having sort of loggerheads with stuff. You've got to get on with it and speak about it and develop it and make sure it works.
Well, let's hope that that is the case. Now, of course, you have that magnificent Sevens tournament every year, which is part of the K7 circuit and hugely popular. And fair to say, without that on the calendar, it would be a real struggle running the club.
Definitely. That's our big day of the year. Coincidentally, I was president the first year we actually joined the Kings of the Sevens when we committed the money to the prize fund. And it was a big move for us, but it paid off, and now it's reaping the benefits every year. So the past 2 years, like everybody else, we've struggled. We're not getting a tournament, so we just have to sort of rebuild from that and keep the purse strings tight.
But it really is a very enjoyable tournament. It's a great social occasion, of course, and you have some fantastic rugby going on in the park here.
Well, it's a balance of that. It's a balance of the social side, but also the rugby side. The teams that come here enjoy themselves, and they want to go out in that park and show their wares, shall I say. And spectators will watch them, they'll have a beer, they'll watch them have a beer. And some of the local towns really follow it well.
Yeah, well, it's always very successful. I've always enjoyed coming here at the Hoch. Now, of course, you're also Borders Regional Clubs representative at Scottish Rugby, and you've been with the SRU for a long time as well. How long, in fact?
I did 6 years previously, and I had to stand down for 6 years because that was the governance, you have to stand, and this is now my 4th year back on again.
Right, and it's so important for Borders clubs to have a voice within the Scottish Rugby Union.
It's important because I represent the regional clubs rather than the top clubs. They've got their club representatives, but it's good having a Borders voice there. But I think it's quite key that I'm seen to be there to listening to the smaller clubs, no disrespect to them in their size, but listening to them and their problems and taking them forward to Murrayfield.
What about the Border League in general terms then? Because I think there's a governance thing going on at the moment to get the Borders voice heard even more with more representation. What can you tell us about that?
That's still ongoing, but there is consultation now out to the clubs with early thoughts on that. And that'll hopefully be progressive the next few months. But I'm not in that governance working party. But there has been a questionnaire went out to the clubs initially.
More from Alistair and Alastair very, very shortly. But this season it's the centenary of Hawick Linden, and they started their season well with a win last week at home to Leith. I spoke to President David Gray recently to find out more about the club and their plans to celebrate their 100 years. Well, David, a proud president in the 100th year of Hawick Linden.
Yes, it's a great honour to become president of Hawick Linden. It's sort of going second time around the committee men now. So lucky for me, or maybe unlucky for me, I've been nominated for president in this centenary season. So it's all go. Everybody's getting excited, and we just look forward to the near future and see what happens.
What sort of plans have you got? I know there's a book coming out eventually and probably a dinner at the end of April, but there'll no doubt be a few other things as well to mark the occasion.
Yeah, well, there's obviously new kit on its way. We've got a new set of jerseys coming out for our first league game next week. We've got new tracksuits coming out. We've got tie pins coming out, all emblazoned with centenary memorabilia kind of thing. We mentioned the book. It hopefully will be all edited and published ready for Christmas, so we can get some stocking fillers for that. We've also got maybe one or two social events coming up, but first thing and foremost is just getting the team started again after the extended delay with the COVID. So we're concentrating on the team just now, and then hopefully the rest will just follow on.
Now, I must mention, obviously, the Hawick Harlequin situation, which is obviously disappointed everybody, and obviously your local rivals, but you know them very, very well. Yeah,
we've got a lot of good friends in the Hawick Harlequins, and it really is. It is a sad day for Hawick Harlequins and for Hawick Rugby. They have intimated on social media that they're going to run a social aspect in their club rooms and everything else, and hopefully in the near future, if there's enough players can come forward again, they can rebuild their team and their club. So, a lot of clubs, not just in the Borders, but in Scotland, have maybe touched on that near sort of, no saying death thing, but it's a frightening scenario when you lose a kind of generation in a team, and it's really hard nowadays to rebuild a team. So, it's huge sympathy to Hawick Harlequins at this present moment. Being involved in rugby now, it's almost become a full-time involvement. The volunteer aspect it's becoming more and more demanding, and again, people with their work and maybe family commitments, they find it hard to really commit all that time aside. So you've got to be very lucky and get those volunteers that are willing to put their hands up and just support the club endlessly. And again, very fortunately, we've got a good set of committee that will just see the job through.
Now, let's have a look at the history of Hawick Linden. This is where you give me a history lesson, hopefully. Right. It all started in, obviously, 1921. How did it all come about?
Well, again, it was a group of young lads that were playing up Linden Terraces, and basically there was more and more of them, and they were all sort of running about and playing rugby and such like. So they decided to form a team, and then it just sort of progressed from there. In sort of 1921, they had their first game. I can't quite remember who it was against. He really caught us on the hop here. But they were on the wrong end, about a 60-odd point bashing. But I think a few weeks later they had a return match and they only got beat 3-0. And it really just kind of pushed on from there. Within a couple of seasons they were winning the league. And again, we've been very fortunate, and we've had our fair share of success right through the century, more or less. We've had our share of internationalists.
So, Tony Stanger, I suppose, the most famous.
Yeah, Tony Stanger. I remember Tony's first game for the Linden was up at Livingston, an early kick-off, and it was before a Scotland-Ireland game, and I'll not say too much about the game, but it was an eventful day. It was snowing on the way back. We was in the Nichols bus. It was a great old sing-song, and pies were everywhere, and I think I managed to crash the bus on the way back, coming through Selkirk.
Oh dear.
The bus skidded off the road.
Oh gosh.
But we were all right, there was no injuries. We picked up the driver. The driver went into the janitor's house at the high school. He got a cup of tea, and then we got back on the road again, back home. But they were the kind of days away we had. We were out all day. It really was good.
Well, certainly this season, the 100th anniversary, you're very much looking for some good results on the park.
It's a new beginning after the 18 months that we've had. So again, we'll just take kind of, the old adage is we'll just take 1 week at a time. We've had a very good pre-season up to now, and we've fortunately won our 3 warm-up games, and we were fortunate. We got knocked out the first round at North Berwick against a good home side, but we progressed in the play and actually won the play at North Berwick, beating the likes of Dunbar and Livingston. So we've been quite happy the way things are just slowly building up. Just see what happens come sort of February, March time.
Well, we certainly look forward to visiting Hawick Linden in the very near future with one of our shows. But for the moment, thanks so much indeed for joining us.
Thanks very much, Stuart. Thank you.
David Gray, President of Hawick Linden, and we wish them all the best in their centenary year. Alistair, before we heard from David Gray there, you were mentioning obviously that Selkirk Youth Club are 100 years for them, but also there's a number 100 in Earlston connection.
Yes, this is the 100th year actually playing at the Hawick. I believe, long before my time, we played up the Georgefield Road. This is actually the 100th year of playing at the Hawick. We are hoping to try and celebrate 150th in a few years' time. We're researching to try and actually find when the club was formed, but we think it was sometime between 1871 and 1876. So that's a big one for us.
So what can you tell us about Earlston Rugby Club history-wise? Are you a studier of the old history there?
Oh, wow.
No, not at all.
On the spot.
Ronald Kerr was one of our past presidents. He was really deep into that. The pitch actually behind you there, that was a tank park during the war for the Polish infantry.
Right.
So that's why it's quite a good drainer, because I think it was the concrete was all broken up. And I believe that post-war there was a battle another pun there, but a battle to actually get the pitch reinstated. And the then club secretary had to fight tooth and nail with the War Department to get it reinstated, and they did.
Well, there we are.
So I think if you look at the bottom end there's a bit of concrete still there, and that's partly some of the road.
I shall look at things very differently from now on. What else can you tell us about Earlston? I'm drilling down here.
You're drilling down me here, aye. We've actually played at the first Melrose Sevens.
Right, yeah.
I don't know if you realise that.
1883.
Yeah, so we must have been formed.
Yes.
To me, it's a great club. Really sociable. We welcome anybody who wants to come and play for us. All the time I've played here, that anybody wanting to come on and put the jersey on is made more than welcome. We have a good sort of loyal support, and everybody's there. When you're winning, you do get more people down. If you're struggling, you don't have the support. But the guys put their effort in, and that's all about. That's what rugby's about.
And you've had your share of successes as well. Let's not shy away from that. I mean, I was down here, I think it was the week before the Earlston Sevens, some years ago now, but you played Walkerburn for the title and you won it.
That was then Division 3, yeah.
Yeah.
And got up to there. But I mean, we've had, let's see now, I can't remember the year, but we beat Bigger to win the then National 7.
Yes. Dale's happy about that.
Unfortunately, they dropped me that weekend.
All right, okay. Well, back to Alastair then. Alastair, how did you end up here at Earlston yourself?
Well, actually, this is the club where I started playing rugby. I think it was about 7 or 8 years old. My dad actually played here for the adult team, and they had juniors going, and I just came down one week and started playing. And I think I continued playing up until about was 15, and then on this very pitch itself, I think in the training session for, I think it was the Melrose Crichtons, unfortunately broke my leg. So that led to a wee 6-year stint away from rugby, until eventually, coming down watching it, I wasn't content to stand at the sideline, so decided to come down to a training session again, and kind of regretted it to begin with, because I realised those 6 years they weren't spent on fitness anyway. So there was a lot to say running up and down the pitch, and it was hard going, but eventually the fitness picked up. I went from playing 20 minutes at the end of the game to the full 80 now. Still regretting coming sometimes.
So what brought you back? Obviously, if you're not playing for a while, what brings you back to a club? Because obviously there's a lot of players drift away. Probably during that period where you got injured. So what made you think I'm going to come back?
It was really just coming down a few weekends and watching, and it's just when you're watching people run past, having fun, hitting a boy. You miss it.
Yeah. Legally assaulting people. Yeah. That's what brought you back.
Now, of course, you were never going to be a scrum half. I think that's fair to say. So you're a second row, playing for Earlston. Tell us some of the other guys that we should be looking out for this season.
Well, we've got a prop called Pod. He's a beast with a ball. He's basically maxing out the squat machine as well. So when he gets the ball, it's difficult to put down. We've got another boy, Aaron. He joined the club a few years back, and he's really come on at the 10 position. There's of course my brother. He just gets the ball, runs, kicks, even when people are telling him not to. Not always the smartest decision. He might also get a yellow card from a ref for talking back. we've got a really good group of guys to watch out for and hopefully play some entertaining rugby.
And despite the defeat on Saturday, I mean, you've got plenty to look forward to. Gallow IM in a couple of weeks' time, which is going to be a big game. It's a long season, and the morale's always good here.
Oh yeah, it's far too early in the season to be downbeat on one result. Plenty of games to play, and like I said, Dalkeith, they're potentially going to be the hardest team we play. So the goal is, go out there and have fun in other games, and when Dalkeith come back round again, we can put in a better performance than we done on Saturday.
Now back to you, the other Alistair now, Alistair Forsyth, and we were talking earlier about the leagues and clubs folding and stuff like that. Would you like to see more regional rugby rather than the setup that we have at the moment, which is 3 national leagues and a premiership?
I've always been a believer that we should have extended regional leagues as far as we can. We know the problem when we try to get guys to travel. I've always said the cost is insignificant because you'll confine the money, but finding the players is a difficult part. Guys who are working don't want to sort of go now fast Edinburgh and away from the Borders. The years when we used to play national rugby, you would inevitably go up north with a weak side and they would come down to you a weak side, and that's, to me, that's not for the benefit. But you then got to consider what the north teams have, that they don't have the same numbers. So it's trying to get that balance to ensure they have a quality of rugby, because they're like us, they want to play as well. And that's what Scottish rugby is about, the whole country. But certainly I've always been an advocate to try to extend regional rugby as far as you can, just to try and maximise the guys who can play on the day. Especially now when you're needing so many subs, and you've coached, you need so many subs, so you want to take 7 with your first team, so your second team then gets decimated, and inevitably they're the ones that are called off.
And where do you stand on the cup competition? Do you think that's a good thing for the clubs to have a crack at the bigger clubs now and again?
I think it's a 50-50 split across the country. I think you could be bullish and said it's great to have a game against somebody, but when it comes to the day, unless you do having a good run in your own team, you inevitably actually don't want to play them, because it's going to be another beating, and that's when the club is struggling. That's what you're not wanting.
And of course, famously, remember when Selkirk and I think Hawick Linden went all the way up to Orkney and blew basically half their year's budget on a private jet to get there.
Well, Earlston, actually, we went twice to Orkney.
Right.
To 2 years on the trot.
So how did that work out for you?
Very financial.
Yes.
But again, as I say, it's balancing it, because these guys are doing that every week.
Yeah.
So you have to applaud them for their endeavours to get the game played. But it is a challenge, very hard challenge, and it's a debate that'll go on for a long time.
Below National 1 to the top of the Premiership now, there's such a big gap between them and the rest, and I think if you have a national cup, there'd mostly be squash matches. It's very rare that you get a really good team coming through from lower down. Usually it's financial, they've had an injection of cash, they've maybe had a group of players that have bought into the club's ethos and they want to, there's jobs there, it's not like the old days when you hardly left your town, people travel. So you don't get like a Howe Fife or a Mar coming through anymore, that if they were in National 3 they could beat a Premiership team. So it has to be sensible, because some of these guys they're almost semi-pro, or they've came semi-pro, so to play an ex-semi-pro rugby player to play like a joiner or a butcher or whatever, an accountant, it's quite dangerous probably, but some players would revel that opportunity, and that's why they change clubs. But probably a national competition probably is not great. The other thing is, like Orkney, I've actually, in the students that I've welcomed to the college this week, one of them plays for Dunfermline, and he's missing out on the Orkney trip this week because he's come down to Galashiels. He actually lives in Rosyth. He come down to Galashiels. He can't travel up to Orkney in time to play on the Saturday, so he's missing out on that trip. So that's how you come into it in terms of players missing games. But it's still got to be accessible. Orkney are part of the union, so it's maybe, do you make them have a little disadvantage because of their location? I think that's quite unfair. So you've got to make it accessible, and it seems to. I think you get welcomed really well. I've played Orkney Sevens before, and it was a great weekend. Absolutely loved it. The people are great up there. So you kind of have to give them their opportunity to make it accessible. There might be a time in a few years where they don't have a lot of players, and then that trip over to Orkney is lost. But now I feel like it's part of just what we need to do to make sure that we try and grow the game.
Well, lots to talk about there. Let's change the subject a little bit now, because I hooked up with Stephen Turnbull, one of our top referees, and this was a couple of weeks ago down in Edinburgh, and we had a chat about all sorts of things. Tell us about the new laws that's going to affect this season, because I think we all need a bit of a refresher.
I think the one in particular, there's a few around the breakdown which I think are important to try and speed up the play and the time that the ball spends in the field of play rather than within the breakdown. And then of course there's the held up over the line, and the goal line dropout was the other one that's been introduced. So a number that are changing the way the game will be played, and obviously try to speed up the game as well.
But the one thing that keeps coming back time and time again is interpretation of the law by a referee. It's the one thing we always hear about the coaches and the players afterwards, and say, well, we've trained one way, but the interpretation of the referee, didn't help us on that particular occasion. How do you deal with that?
I think it's really important to recognise that the laws are there for interpretation, and every referee referees differently. And I think that helps to add to the spirit of the game, in which we can have a spectacle from both the refereeing perspective and from the playing perspective. And what referees do is a lot of work with clubs, both in the pre-season period and throughout the season, to upskill coaches and players on the various laws and the interpretation and the way in which the game is going to be refereed. Because ultimately we have a strategy that we set out at the start of the season about how we're going to referee the game, and it's really important that that's translated to clubs, players, and of course into the game itself. I think referees set the stall early on in the game is the first thing I would say, and I think that consistency across the game allows the players to adapt as the game progresses. In advance of games, referees spend a lot of time, as players and coaches will, analysing previous games to understand what it is that we're trying to achieve through the game and the ways in which different teams play, and I think that's really important to maximise the referee's performance on the pitch.
Now this year we've seen the SRU have come out with a strategy for referees, a 3-year plan, if you like, which has just come out, so I don't expect you to know it off by heart by now, but give us the basics of that.
I think the principles behind the strategy, which has been developed between the Scottish Rugby Union and the Rugby Referees Association, is really to improve the standard of officiating across the country, and in doing so working with societies who manage the game at a grassroots level, and basically trying to ensure that we have the improved quality of officiating across the country, to improve the retention and recruitment of match officials, which of course remains a challenge throughout the country, and then of course to improve the stature of referees across the European and world stage. And we obviously have a number of examples. We think about Sam Grove-White and Holly Davidson, who've just represented Great Britain at the Olympics, and actually we're now punching above our weight in terms of the presence of match officials on the European and world stage. And I think this strategy, working as a whole with clubs, with coaches, with members of the public, and with people like yourself, to try and improve the visibility of refereeing across the country. Even
5 years ago, we didn't have any representation on the world stage, and now, as you say, there's like young Sam and Michael Adamson and Holly Davidson, and things are seemingly progressing, and of course that's very attractive to youngsters wanting to get in.
I think it's important to recognise that referees come from all walks of life. So for example, we have youngsters who come straight from school, and their ambition is not necessarily to play the game of rugby. We have retired players through a number of reasons, such as injury, and that is really where we want to try and harness the experience and skills of those former players who have the understanding of the game of rugby, and therefore they can just move into the interpretation of the laws, as we talked about, and to make sure that the spectacle of rugby actually happens, because of course we all know that without a referee the game simply cannot happen.
Do you have much of a take-up from ex-players?
We've had an improved take-up from ex-players, I would say, particularly because if we think about the Borders Rugby Referees Society, we've done enormous work with the clubs to try and identify those ex-players who could potentially move on a referee pathway. And we also work with them throughout the season to understand better the way the game of rugby is going to be played across the country. But that also enables us to identify those match officials who we think we could take through the pathway to contribute to the game of rugby that's probably given them so much over the years of playing.
And if someone's thinking about becoming a referee, what should they do in the first instance?
The first instance for somebody who would like to become a referee is to visit the Borders Rugby Referees Society website or the Scottish Rugby Union's website, and there is a section dedicated to match officials and plenty of contact details there for people to get in touch. And what I would say to these people who are considering becoming a referee is it gives you very much the same enjoyment as playing. It's a different type of experience, but it is essentially getting the best view of the game in the middle of the park. And of course you contribute back to the game of rugby, which gives us all so much, either through watching, supporting or playing and enjoying the game.
And do you have to have a thick skin?
I think you need to understand that people are passionate about the game of rugby, and therefore you need to think about
Very diplomatic.
the way in which you do that.
Excellent. And just finally, and this is something that I've always wanted to know for a long, long time, the sound of the whistle in rugby is very different to the sound of the high-pitched whistle in football. Why?
I think it's really interesting because the whistles are probably the definition of a referee, and of course referees use quite thick metal whistles which produce a much deeper sound and can be controlled, in that you can increase the pitch and decrease the pitch by the way in which you blow into the whistle. Now, football referees use plastic whistles which are quite long in size, and they project the sound in a more high-pitched way. So really interesting that the definition of a whistle is quite important when you think about the game of rugby.
So dogs can enjoy football probably a bit better.
Absolutely.
It's nice to talk to you about whistles and the new laws and the changes and everything else that's happening at the moment, and have a great season, all of you.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Stephen Turnbull, who does some tremendous work within the Borders Rugby Referees Society. Well, before we go, we're going to have a look at the fixtures for the weekend, subject to call-offs, of course, and we start on Saturday with the Tennent's Premiership, and let's have a look. We've got Curry and Mar, Edinburgh Accies against Jed Forest, GHA against Hawick, Glasgow Hawks against Aberdeen Grammar, and Selkirk versus Musselburgh. Let's quickly have a look at them. Dale, what stands out for you there?
I think the Selkirk Musselburgh games looks like it'll be a pretty good one. Musselburgh are a very, very difficult team, especially early in the season. If kind of memory serves me right, they're always very, very strong at the start. Border Links as well. They've got ex-Colts, People's Colts coach Graham Patterson coaching them as well, and they're a good, strong outfit. They seem, on conversations with Graham as well, they've had a good pre-season. They've got a couple of players in from the surrounding areas that want to play a higher level, and the player of the tournament at the People's Sevens, James Ferguson. He is Musselburgh as well, and he was a player that arrived at Musselburgh for a little bit more rugby. And Selkirk, we know what Selkirk bring. Selkirk are a really good outfit, local outfit. They've got a lot of good players in as well that we've seen mostly during the Sevens. Unfortunately not to get that game against Jed, but it's at home. They've got the seconds playing there as well. On the back pitch, they'll be hoping the weather's okay, get a big crowd, and they'll be hoping to try and kind of catch up after missing out. So I think that'll be a really good game. Jed Edinburgh Accies, there's not a lot you can probably take for that, because they're two teams that were scuppered by COVID last week, didn't get their season off to a start, but certainly Hawick on the road will be want to try and compound a little bit of misery on GHA, because they did get beat by Musselburgh in their opening game. So Musselburgh again, bit of form going down to Philippock, but Hawick will be wanting to try and compound misery, put a bit of pressure on Mar at the top, because it seems like Mar are going to be again one of those teams that are going to be vying for the top of the league.
Let's have a look at Tennent's National 1. There's an early kick-off at Millbrae, Ayr against Gala. That's at 1:15, because obviously the warm-up for Ayrshire Bulls Super 6 game a little bit later on that evening. Melrose go to Boroughmuir, and Kelso have a home tie against Highland. So let's concentrate on those three involving the Borders sides.
Ayr, narrow win against Highland in their opening game, but I think Gala have got a little bit of experience with players like Ewan Dodds, who's been up to Millbrae before when Gala were at their peak over the last few years. So he'll take a lot of experience up there, and Ayr might get a little bit complacent with their Super 6. It's a big reshuffle with the clubs up there just now with the Super 6, trying to find their feet and trying to get that club identity back into their amateur team. I feel from the outside looking in, very tight game. I think Gala might just nick that up there.
And Melrose going to Boroughmuir.
I think Melrose they seem to really be clicking. I think at the end of the Sevens they're getting the confidence, a good win against a good Heriots team, and I think they'll probably keep going and they'll get a win on the road as well.
Kelso against Highland, that's going to be an interesting one.
It'll be tight. Obviously Highland just narrowly losing to Ayr. Again, with those sort of games it's difficult to see where the clubs are, but for Kelso to exercise the demons of going up to Cartha and eventually getting the win up there after a historical bad result. It's a different team. I think it'll breed confidence, and the guys will be wanting itching to get out out, and they're at home, so they'll be itching to kind of put in a good performance in front of the crowd at Poynter Park.
Other couple of matches to mention: Dundee High will take on Watsonians, and Heriot's Blues against Carth at Queen's Park, and Stirling Wolves at home to Biggar, who really started off coming out the traps flying last week. So they're going to be a team to look out for, even though it's not Dale's favourite team, obviously being a Peebles man.
No, I've got a couple of good friends there, like Craig Borthwick, good friend of mine, playing in the second row, and he brings a lot of experience, and I think, I do that in jest. Biggar are played some of my most exciting games against Biggar, and they've given me a lot of good rugby memories playing Peebles, Biggar, the rivalry that's there, but it's all very friendly. But I think they're again a formidable team, very unlucky like Dalkeith to miss out on that promotion due to COVID, and I think they'll really have a point to prove. And Biggar are a well-drilled, well-organised, well-backed, well-coached outfit, so I'd imagine they'll come out all guns blazing again as well.
I have to say that still rankles with me when we see Biggar with the trophy and the celebrations and then having it taken away from them. That wasn't good. That wasn't a good look.
No, probably not for club rugby. They were very unfortunate. I think that's all you can put it down to, but they'll have a point to prove. They'll want to get back up and push up and try and get promoted this year.
Same with Berwick and Dalkeith as well, of course. So National 2, our featured commentary match will be Peebles against Stuart's Melville, and Stuart McFarlane will be calling this one again. What can you say about this one, Dale?
I know it's a game they've targeted. I know they've looked at Stuart's Melville just on paper, and Kirkcaldy has been the two teams that they want to beat. To try and put a marker down. Unlucky against Kirkcaldy, but there's a lot of injuries. John Gray's unfortunately got a skull injury actually, so he's going to be out. Another couple of injuries with Greg Rayburn and the like, so they're quite depleted in some areas of the squad. But the front row, they've got a lot of good cover. They've got Ryan McConnell back playing hooker, who's an exceptional player, Scotland age grade representative, and a really good club player. He played great for Peebles in his first stint, just came back after a little break. Willie Aitken also being a good servant, used to play for Stu Mel as well. And then the captain Neil Hogarth used to play in the wing, and he's now captain the club from prop. So they've got good experience, good old heads there. It'll just be the longevity and making sure that they can play 80 minutes. But I know what they're like. I know they're good players. They're good hardy men as well. So they'll give their all when they're playing for Peebles. And hopefully they can kind of push on and make a real game of it. Fraser Strachan actually is playing 9 for Stu Mel last week. He was ex-Peebles as well, so a little bit of rivalry there in between the ranks. And it's
Peebles' first home game of the season. They've come very, very close in their 2 games so far against Gala and obviously at Kirkcaldy as well. And on to National 3, and we fingers crossed that this one takes place. Obviously Berwick had to pull out of their games because of COVID last week. Hopefully everything will be ready to go for that one at Scremerston, and it's against Greenock Wanderers, who of course the team they beat in the National Shield final with that match.
The official will probably be hoping it's a little bit low scoring, so he's not having to run up and down the field and all day long, because it was
57-35 or something.
Yeah, so it was
huge.
An exciting game for that. But again, different teams, different era. There's a new batch of faces coming through. So Berwick looked really impressed with the game I've seen against Peebles. It was really scrappy. The weather was pretty poor, but they certainly looked like they had a lot of players that were wanting to play rugby, and I think the conditions didn't allow them to do that. So if it's dry conditions, they'll be wanting to spin the ball out, get the balls to some of their quicker players out wide. The only difficulty for them will be the experience when it comes to getting a little bit wet, changing their game plan slightly. But that's only from a one look at a game against Peebles in a pre-season game when players were interchanging. But they'll be, again, it's all the kind of cliches. They'll be wanting to try and get off to a good start, but for the rest of their season, you have to lay the foundations now, and they'll be certainly wanting to get a win and really kick on from there.
Now into the East League, and Duns get their first match against Forrester. That's happening in East League 1. East League 2, Langham at home to Christophin in their 150th year. Hawick Linden away at Pennycook. And in the East League 3, no game for Earlston, of course, but Galloway are at home to Lismore. And we'll quickly go through the semi-junior Border League. And I think, Alistair, you were saying as well that the semi-junior league would have celebrated their 100th anniversary last year.
Last year, and this is 100 plus 1.
100 plus 1, is that how they're looking at it?
I think so, and they're still going to be trying to do some celebrations to mark the occasion. It's the longest playing league in the world.
Really?
Semi-junior league.
Yeah, fantastic. So there we are. We didn't realise that, but we do now, Dale, don't we?
Yeah, that's a good fact. It's good to see it's survived so long, but it just shows how many players we've got playing rugby at a young level consistently. It's somewhere they do drop off following that.
And then, of course, on Sunday, the Southern Knights will be playing at Boroughmuir.
No, it's going to be an interesting game. Southern Knights have had that little, they had a really good start to the season, kind of fell off a little bit with a defeat to Watsonians, and really have to try and get back on. It's a competitive league. It is one of those things that I think Scottish rugby's been crying out for it. Something we've maybe not all got our teeth into it yet. I don't think we've all bought into it yet, but it's certainly starting to really push on. I think the standards getting it's almost professional rugby. It's very, very intense, very high impact and very structured, but that is top level rugby, and it's something that's perhaps needed to bridge the gap, and Southern Knights will be looking to try and get back on and keep the pressure up the top, because they're certainly in a position where they can perhaps fight for the title.
And one other game on Sunday, the Kelso ladies at Broughton. Now, they had a false start last week. They couldn't field a front row, so the match was awarded to West of Scotland 28-0. I think that's the way it works if you can't field a full team, and so it's like a 5-point win to the opposition with a 28-0 scoreline put onto the scoreboard. So hopefully Kelso ladies get off the mark this time.
Yeah, I think the only probably analysis I've got of that is hopefully that they can play. Get out and play some rugby. No point looking at form and no point in looking at a prediction. You just want them to be playing rugby because that's what they're there for. Certainly when they did play at People Sevens with the ladies tournament, there was a good buzz, a good excitement about the club, and hopefully pushing on this year and being competitive and building. The only way you're going to build is if you play rugby, so hopefully they can get the players down and a little bit of luck on their side as well, keeping players fit. They can get a game this weekend.
Well, as the sun goes down behind us at Earlston, we say thanks to Alistair Forsyth and Alastair Cessford, and of course to you, Dale Clancy, as well. Next week we're bringing the show to Galloway M, and we'll be inside their clubhouse come rain or shine, and we'll be talking a little bit about them. They had a great win, of course, last week, 40 points to 0, and they'll be looking to back that up this coming Saturday. But that's it from us for today. Thanks very much indeed for watching. Bye for now.